Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. In this photo, we see a drive-in theater, a true icon of the 1950s and 1960s, beloved by the baby boomer generation. These outdoor theaters began to emerge in the United States in the 1930s, but it was after World War II that they truly became popular, turning into the main meeting point for families and young people. The most interesting thing is how they listened to the movie's sound. At first, each car had a small metal speaker attached to the window. You just had to turn a knob to adjust the volume, and there you had it, your own private cinema inside the car. Later, some drive-ins modernized this by broadcasting the sound over the radio, so you just needed to tune in to the right frequency and listen to the movie with the sound quality of your car. The VCR, that famous video recorder, brought a real revolution to homes. For the first time, people no longer had to stick to broadcast schedules. They could press a button and record their favorite shows to watch later. Moreover, the VCR popularized movie rentals, bringing the cinema experience into the home. Choosing the right tape at the video store became almost a family ritual, and rewinding before returning was the golden rule. Baby boomers remember well the days of film cameras when capturing memories was a careful process. Photography wasn't instantaneous. Each click had to be planned because rolls of film had a limited number of exposures. Without knowing how the photo had turned out, there was always the anticipation of developing them as soon as possible. The iconic Woodstock Festival, held in 1969, marked a generation. Initially planned as a paid event for 50,000 people, the festival ended up being free due to the massive attendance of around 400,000 participants. For 3 days on a farm in New York State, Woodstock offered music, peace, and protest, with legendary performances by Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, and Santana. Phone books were undoubtedly the Google of the time for the baby boomers. They were thick volumes of yellow and white pages filled with essential information about who was who and where to find what you needed. In a time when the internet did not exist, these books were true treasures of contacts, with phone numbers and addresses of practically every service and person in the city. Before the digital age and streaming, cassette tapes offered a unique experience for baby boomers. They allowed the creation of mixtapes, a popular way to share favorite songs, mark special moments, or gift someone dear. Cassette tapes also contributed to the birth of hip-hop in the 1970s and 1980s, being used by DJs and independent artists to record and distribute their music on the streets, making new sounds and styles accessible to everyone. In the 1950s, a type of roller skate quite different from today's versions conquered the rinks. With wooden or metal bases and leather straps, these skates had no built-in boots. Users would fasten their own shoes to the frame. This required a bit more skill, but offered a unique sense of freedom for those venturing into the streets. These skates were the first to be used in roller rinks, which began to emerge in the United States as a popular form of leisure. Banana seat bicycles bring back fond memories for many baby boomers. With their high handlebars, small wheels, and that long, curved seat, these bikes were a true style icon in the 1960s and 1970s. The unique look and sense of freedom made every ride feel like a grand adventure. For those who lived through this era, these bikes represent a childhood filled with fun and unforgettable moments. The hippie movement, which grew in the 1960s, became a symbol of counterculture and rebellion for many baby boomers. With the motto of peace and love, hippies challenged social norms, promoting values of freedom, personal expression, and harmony with nature. The Woodstock Festival in 1969 highlighted hippie culture, cementing its impact on society and leaving a legacy of questioning and the pursuit of a fairer and more peaceful world. Baby boomers had the opportunity to witness one of the most significant moments in American history. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered on August 28, 1963, during the March on Washington. This speech, given to a crowd of over 250,000 people, became a symbol of the civil rights struggle and continues to be a reference in the pursuit of equality and justice. In the photo, We see everyone reading the newspaper with the headline about President John F. Kennedy's assassination on the front page. This event, like the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., left a deep mark on the baby boomers. Many were young at the time, but felt the impact of these tragedies in their lives. After Kennedy's assassination in 1963, TV sales skyrocketed, with millions of people eager to follow the news live on TV. Here, we see CBS journalist and anchor Walter Cronkite taking off his glasses as he prepares to announce the president's death. This was one of the first moments when television united the country, becoming a milestone in media history. The transition to the digital age gained momentum with the vision of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, two baby boomers who, in 1976, founded Apple in the Jobs family's garage. With the launch of the Apple I, they introduced one of the first personal computers accessible to enthusiasts and hobbyists, sold as a kit that required the buyer to assemble some parts. This innovative approach attracted attention and soon led to the success of the Apple II, which revolutionized personal computing and marked the beginning of the home computer era. For many baby boomers, video game consoles changed home entertainment. With systems like the Atari 2600, the excitement of arcades came into homes, bringing games like Pong and Space Invaders to everyone. The Atari 2600 was one of the first to use interchangeable cartridges, which meant there were many different games to choose from, and helped popularize home video gaming. In the photo, you see a rotary dial phone like many had at home in the 1960s. The design was simple, large, heavy, and usually in colors like black, beige, or green. To make a call, you had to turn the dial for each number, which required a bit of patience. There was no caller ID or voicemail, so you answered without knowing who was calling. And that typical dialing sound? It was part of everyday life. Those who lived through this time still remember well how it was, and many feel nostalgic. Before email and scanners became common, the fax machine was the preferred way to send important documents quickly. In many offices and homes, it was indispensable, allowing contracts, letters, and other papers to be transmitted in a matter of minutes, using only a phone line. Older baby boomers likely remember a time when changing the channel on the TV required a bit more effort. Instead of using a remote control, one had to get up from the couch and turn the knobs directly on the TV set. Each channel change came with the characteristic clicking sound, and it was often necessary to adjust the antenna to improve the picture. Green stamps, fondly remembered by many baby boomers, were small rewards given to customers in stores and supermarkets based on the amount spent. The more you bought, the more stamps you collected, which could be exchanged for prizes like kitchen utensils, toys, or appliances. These stamps became a real craze, with families dedicating entire albums to filling them up and earning their rewards. Hair dryers in beauty salons, common during the baby boomer era, were used to dry and style hair. These large machines were part of the salon ritual, where women would spend hours chatting while waiting for their hairstyles to be ready. Over time, these dryers were replaced by more practical handheld dryers and modern styling techniques, which made the drying process faster and more efficient. Arcade games marked the youth of the baby boomers, filling arcades with flashing lights and electronic sounds. Games like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Asteroids, and Donkey Kong were extremely popular, challenging players to face obstacles, level up, and achieve the highest possible score. Each game was an event, with agile hands on the joysticks and fast fingers on the buttons, trying to beat the previous record. The beehive hairstyle was a true fashion icon in the 1960s, especially among women of the baby boomer generation. With its volume and height, the style involved shaping the hair into a rounded form, resembling a beehive, often held in place with plenty of hairspray to keep it firm and intact. I Love Lucy is a classic sitcom that holds a special place in the memory of those who watched it during its original broadcasts. Released in 1951, the series quickly became a phenomenon and reached the top of the ratings. In 4 of its 6 seasons, it was the most watched program in the United States. The comedy and charisma of Lucille Ball, along with Daisy Arnaz, made the show indispensable for millions of American households. Before color televisions, black and white TVs were common in every home. For baby boomers, this meant watching shows and movies in shades of gray, using their imagination to fill in what was missing in color. Even without vibrant colors, many shows, such as I Love Lucy and The Twilight Zone, became huge hits, proving that the impact of television depended more on quality and content than on color. Back then, making a call meant relying on the help of a telephone operator. They worked by manually connecting calls at a telephone exchange, using huge panels full of wires and plugs to ensure the call reached the right destination. These operators were also part of the local community, often recognizing voices and knowing customers by name. Back then, typewriters were a true revolution in how words were put on paper. They allowed for precise creation of letters and numbers, adding a professional touch to any text, from personal letters to work documents. Before the computer era, these machines were part of the baby boomers' daily life, making writing faster and more efficient. The Miracle on Ice was a moment that left millions of spectators ecstatic. On February 22, 1980, the U.S. hockey team, made up mostly of young college students, achieved the unthinkable by defeating the powerful Soviet Union in the semifinals of the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. The surprising victory against a team considered unbeatable marked an unforgettable chapter in sports history and in the memory of a generation. Western movies were very popular during the baby boomer era, and few are as iconic as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In the photo, we see Clint Eastwood in his famous portrayal as the man with no name, with his intense gaze and characteristic poncho, which became symbols of the genre. For many of that generation, he represents the golden age of Westerns, which dominated the screens and captivated audiences with stories of courage and challenges in the Old West. Elvis Presley, one of the biggest music stars, won hearts with his performances and unforgettable songs. Known as the King of Rock and Roll, he dominated the music charts and sold out concert halls worldwide during the 1950s and 1960s. For many baby boomers, seeing Elvis live was a memorable event. His songs, such as Jailhouse Rock and Hound Dog, continue to be remembered, keeping alive the legacy of one of the most influential artists in music history. There was a time when doctors did not warn against smoking, but advised on which cigarette brand to choose. In old advertisements, it was common to see doctors or actors dressed as doctors recommending a particular brand as the mildest or less irritating to the throat. It was only in the following decades that the true risks of smoking and the negative impact of these ads on public health became understood. Many children of the baby boomer generation loved attaching baseball cards to their bicycle spokes. Using clothespins, they would fix the cards so that they hit the spokes as the bike moved, creating a sound similar to a motorcycle. Interestingly, many of those baseball cards that were used this way are now highly valuable to collectors. The Beatles were much more than just a band for the baby boomers. They became a cultural phenomenon that shaped a generation. In the 1960s, their music not only topped the charts, but also influenced fashion, behavior, and the attitudes of millions of young people. Beatlemania took over the world, with packed concerts, ecstatic fans, and records that quickly became classics. Jukeboxes, icons of the 1950s and 1960s, were a guaranteed presence in diners and teenage hangouts. For baby boomers, these machines were more than just music players. It took only a coin to hear the favorite song of the moment. At the height of jukebox popularity, over 75% of the records sold in the United States were purchased to play in these machines, helping to popularize many hits of the era. During the baby boomer era, even television had a bedtime. In the 1950s and 1960s, TV stations would end their broadcasts at midnight and only come back on air around 6 in the morning. When the clock struck midnight, programming would end, and the screen would display a test pattern like the one in the photo. Before signing off, some stations played the national anthem or showed a patriotic message, something many still remember as part of the bedtime ritual. For those who lived through that era, it was a clear signal that the fun was over and it was time to rest for the next day. When man first set foot on the moon in 1969, the world stood still. About 600 million people from different countries watched this historic moment on television, making it one of the most watched events of all time. It was more than just a technological feat. It became a cultural phenomenon that connected generations and involved viewers of all ages, especially young baby boomers. In the 1960s, malt shops were the favorite places for baby boomers to socialize, offering a unique experience with milkshakes, sodas, and delicious sandwiches. These establishments were known for their lively and cozy atmosphere, where customers could sit on cushioned stools and enjoy a meal while the jukeboxes played the most popular songs of the time. Full-service gas station attendants were a common sight during the 1950s to 1970s, especially for baby boomers. Instead of drivers getting out of their cars to refuel, attendants did everything. They filled the tank, cleaned the windshield, checked the oil level, and, in some cases, adjusted tire pressure. However, with the oil crisis of the 1970s, this level of service began to decline as many stations adopted the self-service model to cut costs. In the past, banks operated very differently. Branches kept their doors open without the security barriers we know today. It was common to offer gifts such as toasters, kitchen utensils, or toys to attract new customers or encourage account openings. Another striking detail is that banks would close completely on weekends, forcing people to plan their financial transactions exclusively on weekdays. In the 1950s, polio was a major fear for parents and children of the baby boomer generation. The disease, which could cause paralysis, affected many children and was a constant concern. Fortunately, the vaccine developed by Jonas Salk in 1955 changed everything. Mass vaccination helped drastically reduce polio cases, bringing relief to families and becoming a significant milestone in the fight against the disease. In the past, it was common to find grocery store clerks ready to accompany customers to their cars and help carry their groceries. This courtesy service, highly valued by baby boomers, was part of customer service, making the shopping experience more personal and friendly. However, this practice began to decline with the popularization of self-service supermarkets and the faster pace of life, which encouraged quicker and more economical methods. In the photo, visitors are attending the first Sunday of the New York World's Fair in Flushing in 1964. This event showcased technological innovations and gave baby boomers a glimpse of what the world could be like in the future. Among the most notable technologies were the IBM 5100, the first personal computer, and the teleconferencing system developed by AT&T, which provided an early look at digital communications. ABC's Wide World of Sports was one of the most sensational shows of its time, bringing unique sports events to TV. This photo is from the episode of February 5, 1976, which broadcast one of Evel Knievel's most famous jumps, the fearless motorcyclist known for his daring stunts. These electrifying moments helped popularize extreme sports and created an adrenaline culture that deeply marked baby boomers who still remember the excitement of watching these feats live. In the 1960s and 1970s, the arrival of the first portable TVs like the Sony Watchman revolutionized entertainment. Sony's model, one of the pioneers in this market, weighed about 5.5 pounds and had a screen of only 5 inches. It quickly became popular due to its innovative design and ability to tune into TV channels anywhere. In the 1960s, milk was delivered fresh to the doorstep in glass bottles with that aluminum cap. Almost a third of families received milk and dairy products this way. To prevent the milk from spoiling, especially on hot days, some families would leave a bowl of cold water on the porch or near the door. The milkman would place the bottles in the bowl, helping to keep the milk fresh until it was collected. Wood-paneled cars, invented in the 1930s, became popular in the 1960s and 1970s. These vehicles, often called station wagons, were known for their classic and spacious style, offering a combination of elegance and practicality. The wood panels applied along the sides of the car were a distinctive feature that made these models stand out on the road. In 1973 and 1979, the United States faced a gasoline crisis that created long lines at gas stations and led the government to adopt odd-even rationing. Drivers could only refuel on specific days, according to the last digit of their car's license plate. These measures left a mark on the memory of many, especially baby boomers, who experienced the shortage and its direct impact on their daily lives. Colonel Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, became an iconic figure not only for his fried chicken recipe, but also for starring in the brand's commercials. In the 1960s and 1970s, he appeared in numerous ads, wearing his famous white suit and black tie while promoting the world's tastiest fried chicken. His image helped establish KFC as one of the most recognized fast food chains globally. In the past, it was common to have intermissions during movies in theaters. In the 1950s and 1960s, screenings often included a 10 to 15-minute break, allowing people to use the restroom, buy snacks, or simply rest a bit. Over time, most theaters began eliminating these intermissions as movies became shorter and technology advanced. In the 1950s, kitchens stood out for their colorful appliances and pastel-toned cabinets. Appliances in colors like pink and mint green reflected the vibrant aesthetics of the time, accompanied by patterned linoleum floors. An interesting fact is that the popularity of these colors was driven by advertising campaigns showing how they could transform the kitchen into a more cheerful space. During the 1960s and 1970s, opposition to the Vietnam War mobilized thousands of baby boomers in a series of protests across the country. Students, activists, and even war veterans participated in mass marches and demonstrations demanding an end to U.S. military intervention in Southeast Asia. In November 1969, around 500,000 people gathered in Washington in the largest anti-war demonstration in American history, becoming a milestone for the movement. On October 22, 1962, American President John F. Kennedy delivered a speech to the nation about the Cuban Missile Crisis. At that time, the world was on the brink of nuclear conflict, with the Soviet Union positioning missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States coast. The speech was crucial in the crisis, which lasted 13 days and resulted in an agreement that averted war. This event remained etched in the memory of many baby boomers who lived through one of the most tense moments in history. In the 1960s and 1970s, directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and Martin Scorsese transformed American cinema. Coppola brought a new approach to complex storytelling with The Godfather. Spielberg redefined entertainment with films like Jaws, and Scorsese explored the darker side of urban experience in Goodfellas. These filmmakers created works that shaped cinema in the following decades. There was a time when communication required more patience and anticipation. Baby boomers remember well the feeling of waiting for a postcard or letter from someone. Checking the mailbox was almost a daily ritual, filled with hope for news from afar. Without instant messages or emails, every piece of correspondence received was a surprise, carrying the affection and stories of those far away. Before major retail chains like Target, Amazon, and Walmart dominated, five and dime stores were where many people found everything they needed. The first of these stores was opened by Frank Woolworth in 1879, marking the beginning of a new era in retail with the idea of offering products at low fixed prices. Although the concept of 5 cents has changed over the years, some stores still preserve this tradition. There was a time when public phones were so common that they could be found on almost every street corner. They were indispensable for those needing to make an urgent call or communicate outside the home. Today, they are rare to see, remaining only as a reminder of how daily life used to be. Very different. Air travel used to be quite different, and many baby boomers remember when smoking on board was common. For decades, it was normal to see passengers lighting cigarettes, and ashtrays were part of the seats. It was only in the 1990s that the rules changed, and smoking on airplanes was completely banned. Before that, flying meant sharing the cabin with clouds of smoke, something unthinkable today, but part of the air travel routine back then. In the 1960s and 1970s, cigarette advertisements were everywhere, featuring iconic figures like Joe Camel, the Marlboro Man, and the famous Lucky Strike slogan, "It's Toasted." These advertising campaigns were ubiquitous and strongly shaped public perception of tobacco. However, as awareness of the health risks associated with smoking grew, society began to demand changes, and tobacco advertising on billboards and other media was eventually banned. During the Cold War, baby boomers grew up in a period of constant fear of a nuclear attack, something that even affected schools. In regular drills, children were taught to protect themselves by ducking under their desks, following the duck and cover practice. These exercises aimed to provide a sense of security in times of uncertainty, although today they are seen as largely ineffective against a real threat. Notepads hanging next to the phone on the kitchen wall were a common item in homes during the baby boomer era. Always at hand, they were used to jot down important messages, notes, or any necessary information during a call. In a time before cell phones and text messages, these pads were essential for keeping communication organized within the home. Debuting on NBC's Puppet Playhouse TV show in 1947, the puppet Howdy Doody was created by Bob Smith, known as Buffalo Bob, seen alongside the puppet in this photo. The character quickly gained his own show and became an icon of the 1950s, marking children's television. His popularity generated a range of merchandise, including a namesake puppet that many baby boomers had the chance to play with. For baby boomers, vinyl records were the only way to listen to music. Buying the first record and playing it repeatedly was an unforgettable experience. Whether enjoying the Beatles or the Beach Boys, vinyl marked an era when music was experienced in a unique and special way. Although records have come back into fashion, for those who grew up in the 1950s, they were the main form of musical entertainment. Transistor radios marked a significant change in how people listened to music and news. Launched in the 1950s, these small portable devices quickly won over the baby boomers. Unlike the large tube radios that were common before, transistor radios were compact and battery-operated, allowing people to take them anywhere. Drive-in diners were a big novelty in the 1950s and 1960s. At these diners, customers stayed in their cars and placed their orders directly from the window. Waiters and waitresses, many of them on roller skates, delivered the food directly to the vehicles. This type of service was practical and fun and became an icon of the pop culture of the time. Printed encyclopedias were must-have items on the shelves of baby boomer families. They were used for school research, discovering curiosities, or simply spending time reading about different subjects. However, with the advent of home computers in the 1990s, these encyclopedias began to disappear. We cannot forget to mention the event that started the baby boomer generation, the end of World War II, celebrated in Times Square as seen in this photo. With the return of soldiers and the economic growth of the following years, there was a significant increase in the number of births, creating a demographic boom. This period of prosperity contributed to the growth and formation of a new generation that would experience a series of social and cultural changes in the following decades. Discotheques were a major phenomenon in the baby boomer era, especially in the 1970s. With illuminated dance floors, mirror balls, and DJs playing hits from artists like Donna Summer, the Bee Gees, and ABBA, these dance clubs became the center of nightlife. For many, discotheques represent a time of joy, extravagant fashion, and the vibrant energy of nights that seemed never to end. Before the 1970s, most cars did not have seat belts, and it was common to see children sitting in the front seat. It was only in 1968 that seat belts were required by law in all new cars. At that time, traffic safety was still developing, and many did not realize the importance of seat belts in protecting passengers, especially children. The sexual revolution brought significant changes for the baby boomers. The introduction of the birth control pill gave people more control over their sexual lives, while the feminist movement advanced in the quest for gender equality. The culture of free love and the shift in social expectations around sexuality and gender roles marked a new era, promoting greater freedom and acceptance of diversity in society. The famous banana-flavored amoxicillin box, very common in the 1960s and 1970s. At that time, liquid antibiotics were often used to treat infections, especially in children. Amoxicillin, one of the most prescribed antibiotics, had this flavored version to make it easier to administer to kids. Many baby boomers remember this flavor, which was described as pleasant by the standards of the time. Who else remembers this bottle of liquid amoxicillin with its characteristic bright pink color? This antibiotic was widely used from the 1970s and 1980s, mainly to treat infections in children. The vibrant color of liquid amoxicillin is one of the standout memories for many baby boomers who grew up taking this medication. GE alarm clock, a nostalgic item common in homes during the 1960s and 1970s. This model, known for its simple design with large numbers and an analog dial, was popular among baby boomers and often sat next to the bed in many households. The characteristic sound of the alarm was loud and mechanical, designed to ensure that no one overslept. Before cell phones and digital clocks, this type of alarm clock was essential to many people's routines. Children playing with candy cigarettes, which were candy shaped like cigarettes, popular from the 1950s to the 1980s. These candies imitated real cigarettes and came in packaging that resembled actual cigarette brands. At that time, it was common to see kids pretending to smoke with these candies, reflecting an era when smoking was much more socially accepted, even in ads targeted at adults. Many baby boomers remember playing with these candies, which today would be seen as controversial.